From the outside, this building looks calm, almost modest compared to Seattle's modern glass towers. But inside, hidden behind hand-laid stone and antique elevators, is a secret world where early ambition, risky engineering, and quiet determination once shaped the entire city. This is Smith Tower, and it has been watching Seattle's skyline change for more than 100 years. Imagine stepping into a time when this was the tallest building on the entire West Coast. Imagine riding an elevator powered the same way it was in 1914. And imagine what it meant to build a tower like this, long before modern skyscrapers even existed. Smith Tower stands in Seattle, Washington, in the historic Pioneer Square neighborhood. Completed in 1914, this 38-story building was the first skyscraper in Seattle and the tallest building west of the Mississippi River at the time. It rises over 500 feet into the air, built from steel and covered with warm, elegant terracotta panels. To early Seattle, this was not just a building. It was a bold statement that this growing port city had a future among the great cities of the world. But Smith Tower is more than an old skyscraper. It is a physical memory of Seattle that no longer exists. A time when wooden streets were lifted by hand. A time when the city itself was being pushed higher out of the mud and seawater. A time before the Space Needle, before the tech companies, before the glass skyline. This tower has quietly witnessed everything. And what makes Smith Tower truly unique is not only its height or age. It is the inventive and unusual choices hidden inside its design. Details that most people never notice, and stories that are rarely told. To understand Smith Tower, you first have to understand the city around it. In the late 1800s, Seattle was not a polished modern city. It was rough, muddy, built mostly of wood. Its streets would often flood with seawater at high tide. Sewage would mix with rain and seawater. The ground was soft. Buildings were unstable. Fires were common. Then, in 1889, disaster struck. The Great Seattle Fire burned through 25 city blocks, destroying much of Pioneer Square. The destruction was massive, but the city saw it as a chance to rebuild stronger and smarter. Instead of wood, new buildings were made from brick and stone. Streets were raised. An entire new level of sidewalks was created above the old ones, the beginning of what we now call Seattle's underground. It was during this time of transformation that a man named Lyman Cornelius Smith entered the story. Smith was a wealthy businessman from the East Coast. He made his fortune manufacturing typewriters, specifically the Smith Premier typewriter, and was seeking his next major investment. During a visit to Seattle, he saw opportunities in a city that was growing rapidly, thanks to railroads, shipping, timber, and the nearby gold rushes. Smith made a bold decision. He would build the tallest building on the West Coast, right in Seattle. Construction began in 1910, on unstable ground that most developers would have avoided. The site was made of a mixture of fill, mud, and debris from the past. But Smith's team used an advanced method: deep concrete footings reinforced with timber piles driven far into the earth below. This was risky, but it worked. To build the tower, they used nearly 2,000 tons of steel and covered it with carefully designed white terracotta tiles, giving it an elegant classical appearance inspired by neoclassical and Chinese-style architecture. Why Chinese influence? That detail came directly from Lyman Smith himself, who had traveled in Asia and admired Chinese architecture. He believed it would give the tower an exotic and distinctive look, unlike anything else on the West Coast at the time. 3 years later, in 1914, Smith Tower opened. It had everything a futuristic building could offer: electric lighting, a heating system, running water, and something unheard of at the time, a high-speed elevator system. People from all over Seattle came just to ride the elevator to the top. and look out over the rapidly growing city, the harbor, and the distant mountains. For many years, Smith Tower was the symbol of Seattle's modern age. It stood alone above the skyline, a single spire of confidence and change in a city still finding its identity. Most people think Smith Tower is just an old building, but inside it holds some truly rare and overlooked features that make it one of the most unique historic towers in America. One of the most fascinating features is something people rarely expect. Smith Tower still uses original hand-operated elevators. These are not modern push-button elevators. Inside, there is an operator who manually controls speed and height using a large lever. This system dates back to the early 1900s and is one of the last of its kind in regular use in a historic building. Imagine standing inside a small wood-paneled cabin, feeling a gentle shake as the elevator rises slowly past more than 30 floors, guided only by human control. Every movement is personal. Every trip is slightly different. This is not just transportation. It is a living piece of history. At the top of Smith Tower sits a hidden treasure that almost no one outside Seattle knows about. On the 35th floor, there is a beautifully decorated space called the Chinese Room. It was created using real artifacts and materials brought from China in the early 1900s. Carved wood panels, lanterns, furniture, and symbols believed to bring good fortune and long life. At first glance, most visitors never realize that this room was never meant to be public. It was designed as a private retreat, a calm and spiritual space hidden high above the city. Large windows surround the room, giving a 360-degree view of Seattle, Mount Rainier, Puget Sound, and on clear days, even the Olympic Mountains. This was where quiet reflection met soaring ambition. Before the Space Needle was ever imagined, Smith Tower was the highest viewpoint in Seattle. From here, people watched ships enter the Puget Sound. They watched new railroads arrive. They watched the city expand street by street. Standing on the observation deck almost feels like hovering over history. Modern glass towers surround it now, but Smith Tower was watching when none of those existed. It has seen fires, world wars, economic booms, depressions, technological revolutions, and massive population growth. Smith Tower was not just a monument. For decades, it was filled with lawyers, dentists, accountants, shipping companies, and independent workers. Each floor was divided into small offices, connected by long, narrow hallways and heavy wooden doors. At first glance, these offices may seem simple, but they represent the beginning of modern business culture in Seattle, the start of white-collar work in a vertical city environment. These tiny rooms were where decisions were made that shaped shipping routes, city planning, and local trade. Most history books never mention that part, but it mattered. Today, Smith Tower is no longer the tallest building in Seattle. Glass skyscrapers and modern technology now dominate the skyline, but Smith Tower is still here, carefully preserved, carefully restored, and deeply respected. The building is now a historic landmark, listed for its architectural and cultural importance. Inside, the lower floors still contain offices, while the upper floors are used as an attraction for visitors. People from all over the world come to ride the original elevators, visit the Chinese Room, walk to the observation deck, learn about Seattle's early architecture, enjoy special events, exhibits, and historic displays. There is also a small museum experience that walks visitors through the history of the building and the people who worked there. Outside, in Pioneer Square, artists, photographers, and history lovers gather to capture the contrast between the past and present. Smith Tower has become a favorite for architecture lovers, local historians, tourists seeking hidden stories, photographers chasing vintage details. It no longer competes in height, it now competes in meaning. And in that way, it still wins. Smith Tower was never meant to be ordinary. It was born from ambition, built on unstable ground, and raised against doubt. It stood alone when Seattle was still finding its place in the world. And now, surrounded by modern giants, it remains calm, steady, and patient. Imagine walking through its halls, running your hand along the cool stone, hearing the soft echo of footsteps that came 100 years before your own. This tower is not just part of Seattle's skyline. It is part of Seattle's memory, a quiet reminder that before the world saw this city as modern and powerful, there was a single tower that believed it would be, and it was right. Thank you for watching. See you in the next documentary.